Cuban Twitter and other times USAID pretended to be an intelligence agency. Foreign governments have long accused the U.S. Agency for International Development of being a front for the CIA or other groups dedicated to their collapse. That is so crazy. The U.S. Agency for International Development is engaged in many conflict zones around the world. I want to begin with some news today, specifically out of a ProPublica report today. Samantha Power.
The U.S. Agency for International Development is engaged in humanitarian work across many of the conflict zones.
They're literally the fucking... This is the CIA. I need you to understand something. This is the CIA.
Zones around the world, from Gaza to Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. Nearly 300 million people in the world are in need of humanitarian assistance. The agency's work is crucial in getting that help to the most...
Like PBS covering USAID with these conditions, with these terms, is also a part of manufacturing consent.
Vulnerable, despite challenges of access and violence. Amna Nawaz sat down earlier this afternoon with the administrator of USAID, Samantha Power, in New York, where world leaders have gathered for the UN General Assembly.
Administrator Power, welcome back to the NewsHour. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to begin with some news today, and that is specifically out of a ProPublica report just today that they're saying that in the spring of this year, USAID submitted a report to the State Department that included an assessment that said Israel was blocking aid into Gaza, specifically medical and food aid. You know that would trigger the U.S. stopping weapons supply to Israel. Can you confirm that you sent that report, and if so, what happened to it?
Well, I think we have made very plain our desire to see as much aid as possible flow into Gaza, our concerns about a lot of the roadblocks that have been put in the way. I'm not going to comment on any report from today, from a long time ago, beyond to say that our focus is as laser sharp on that set of issues around access as the number of trucks flowing in today is not sufficient.
I want to repeat something again. Cuban Twitter and other times USAID pretended to be an intelligence agency. Foreign governments have long accused the U.S. Agency for International Development of being a front for the CIA or other groups dedicated to their collapse. In the case of Cuba, they appear to have been right. In an eye-opening display of incompetence, the United States covertly launched a social media platform in Cuba in 2010. And it's not just the Cuban internet, okay? USAID is supposed to come across like they are not in the pocket of the State Department, like they're not operating in unison with the CIA, but they are. But the moment that you marry the two, like in this case, this is, by the way, this is foreignpolicy.com, okay? This is not like Democracy Now! This is not Counterpunch magazine. This is not Current Affairs. This is fucking foreignpolicy.com. When foreignpolicy.com is writing an article like this, that means the New York Times has written an article like this. That means the Associated Press has also openly written articles about how the USAID is literally operating in unison with the CIA. It means it's significantly worse than this article actually is allowed to talk about. I'm sure you know this, but Samantha Power is literally insane and is obsessed with the Holocaust and how the U.S. never preemptively invaded to stop it. She views every country in conflict this way and believes the U.S. should be deployed everywhere to stop Holocaust. Yeah, she's awesome. Anyway, the reason why I'm telling you all this is because even she is like, yo, what the fuck, Israel? Okay? I covered all of this stuff with USAID specifically so you understand that, like, even certain aspects of the CIA are like, hey, man, what the fuck are we doing here? Can we just, like, dial it back a little bit? Partially because they also understand that America is losing its soft power capabilities. And if America can't do soft power shit, then it's only hard power. And it will fuck up the bag on their hard power initiatives as well. Because we do not have the capabilities, no matter how awesome our military is, no matter how much money we dump into it. Without soft power, America cannot maintain 800 military bases if every single fucking country now views those military bases as invaders, as a military occupation. Overnight, without American soft power, overnight, American military might is crippled. You need to understand that. I also obviously consider the 800 military bases to be military occupation, but that's my assessment. You don't want my opinion to become the, broad majority opinion of not only the civilian populations of each individual state where American military bases exist, but also the opinion of the governments. Because at that point, all of a sudden, that's a military occupation. That's what happens when America loses its soft power capabilities, which is ironically something that a lot of the ultra-Zionists in the State Department are not considering. They're not considering this at all. They're like, nah. They'll shut the fuck up. They don't have anything better.
If I may, because the report is not just alleging that there are roadblocks, as you have lamented before, it's difficult to get aid in. They're alleging that Israel was deliberately blocking aid. In your assessment, have they been, at any point in this war, deliberately blocking aid?
Again, there needs to be improvement, and particularly in advance of winter. There also needs to be improvement, needless to say, in terms of civilian protection. Almost every day it feels like we wake up to...
Just say it, bro. What the fuck? I mean, you don't have a problem saying it in memos.
A report of an internally displaced person camp or a school or a medical facility being subjected to fire. It's extremely challenging to fight in an environment where Hamas is deliberately using civilians as effectively human shields.
Yeah, show this to your mom, Megaphonics. That's your anti-Zionist at the USAID. That's why it's so fucking laughable when people are like, man, the American State Department sure is a little too anti-Israel for my liking,
But
she's like, bro, that was supposed to be inside conversations. Why did you guys go ahead and leak that memo? Okay. Yeah, when I'm having an inside conversation with Anthony Blinken, I'm going to be like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? But now if I have to defend that on the outside to the public, I have to fucking defend Israel. Duh. Because the analysis that I just brought forward in terms of America's soft power capabilities diminishing is something that the State Department absolutely is worried about. Okay? There are obviously reasonable people there who want to maintain America's hegemonic superpower status, who recognize that they can't really do that if everyone fucking hates America, because America is like letting Israel run loose all around the fucking globe. This is precisely the reason why I've been saying, like, there are naysayers in the State Department. They are not anti-Zionist, okay? They're not. They simply understand if Israel is let loose, then everyone's going to be like, what the fuck are you guys doing? What do you mean you want to be the world police? Look at what the fuck you're doing in Gaza.
The responsibility.
It's also additionally funny in a not so funny way, but like it's ironic, I guess, if you could find humor in this. When this conversation is happening so close to like America's moral posture against Russia, uniting the entire globe against Russia. If you are wondering why so many global South nations are pro-Russia and don't give a fuck about Ukraine, this is the reason. Because America's fucked those countries up. So they see Russia as the only fucking power that is actually trying to say fuck you to America through military means. They're wrong, and what Russia is doing is wrong. But if you want to understand why, like, there's random fucking countries of the global South that are like kind of pro-Russia, that's where this anger and resentment and animosity comes from. Okay? What do you think?
Again, on every professional military is to fight in a manner that minimizes the harm to civilians.
As we speak here today, of course, the conflict seems to be expanding as well. There have been some leaders who are expressing concern about the way in which Israel is...
It literally is the enemy of my enemy is my friend as a principle. If you look at Russia's actions without thinking of the human toll, and you don't think about the human toll at all in Ukraine if you're a nation that has been absolutely gutted by America, because you're like, why the fuck do I care about Ukraine? I got my own problems to worry about. And if you look at it from that perspective, you're like, oh, finally someone is like sticking it to the man a little bit after years and years of us getting stuck. And that is the reason why there's so many countries of the global South that are finding themselves in allegiance with Russia, despite its obvious unjustifiable actions in Ukraine.
Now waging war in Lebanon. The UNICEF chief said yesterday that reports of 24 children in Lebanon among the hundreds dead, and she urged people to adhere to international humanitarian law. Can you offer your assessment of the way in which Israel is waging this war? Are they adhering to international law?
watching the risk of escalation and expansion of a conflict that has already displaced tens of thousands of people on the Israeli side, on the Lebanese side, on top of the crisis we were just talking about in Gaza with all of the human.
Hasan isn't saying that Russia shouldn't be scrutinized for their actions in Ukraine. He's saying that the U.S. State Department should have the same smoke for Israel and their genocide. Yes.
Consequences of that, it would be catastrophic. And so all of our diplomacy, again, is invested in trying to contain this conflict. That is what this week at the UN is about, is pressing the parties.
I always mean to ask where you get the 800 military bases number. I agree with you. I think the official number is like, what, 740 or something? Like, it's an exaggeration. It's definitely not 200, unless you're like straight up. It depends on how you calculate a military base. Yeah, it's 750 in at least 80 countries. There's also obviously like, you know, we're not even talking about the covert bases. There are around 750 U.S. military bases in at least 80 countries, though Al Jazeera says the number may be even higher, as not all data is published by the Pentagon. Many U.S. military bases were built after World War II when the U.S. took positions of the global leader and peacekeeper in and around Japan and Germany. I mean, that number is not including black sites. 800 is official. The actual number is close to 1,000 if you count gray bases. Those are that are seemingly civilian but have military properties. Covert bases are another factor. I don't know where you got the 200 number from. Yeah, the rest of the world has 30 bases put together. Yeah, China has 2 military bases, overseas military bases. 2. From this, large bases are bases defined as military installations larger than 4 hectares or worth more than $10 million. These typically have an excess of 200 U.S. military personnel. There are 439, or 60% of the U.S. foreign bases fall under this category. The secret ones are in Albania. No, there's a shit ton of black sites in Egypt and Romania and other parts of Eastern Europe. Those are places where you get, I mean, those are like a house though. Those are like one house or 2 houses. And you go there and you fly someone there to torture them. Terror houses, literally. Yeah, it can even be like a safe house. We hide missiles in them. I don't know why America would feel the need to hide missiles in Eastern Europe when they openly have military bases and also missile silos in general in every NATO country. Guys, in my country of origin, Turkey, we have nuclear missiles, American nuclear missiles in American military bases. Do you understand? That's why I always laugh when Erdogan is like, you know, Erdogan is all the fucking smoke. When Erdogan's like, 1 minute, fuck Israel. Israel is Adolf Hitler. When he says shit like that, it's like, come on, dog. You got American nukes.
To make sure that cooler heads prevail, because if you need a reminder of what conflict looks like,
it's to make the world safe. Yeah, dude, I feel so much safer. I feel infinitely safer when I think of all the nukes that the only country that has ever deployed nukes on foreign civilian territory has all the nukes all around the world ready to be deployed from a safe distance, mind you. That gives me safety and security. That makes me think it's so safe.
Look at the human consequences in Gaza. You know, the fate of the hostages still hanging in the balance, the fate of Palestinian civilians. Look at the displacement that has already occurred in Lebanon, even with this lower grade conflict. So if this were to spiral further out of control, it will only be civilians who pay the price.
You have faced criticism, I think it's fair to say, from even within your own agency, staffers on your team who express a frustration with what they see as a hypocrisy of U.S. foreign policy, that the U.S. continues to supply humanitarian aid on a large scale to try to get that into the people of Gaza at the same time that it's...
Well, no NATO country has been attacked by another nation, so that's pretty safe. Excuse me. Hello? Turkey literally has engaged in battles with Greece. Both are NATO nations, so you're fucking wrong, okay? Turkey, who happens to have the second largest military force in NATO, gets to do those sorts of things. Okay?
Supplying Israel with weapons to continue to wage that war. And I know some of your staffers, it's been publicly reported, have asked you about what they see as the Biden administration's being complicit in what they see as genocide being waged by Israel in Gaza. And one of the things they point out is the fact that you wrote a book on genocide. They've called on you to speak out or to resign. How do you handle that kind of frustration within your own agency, and what are you telling your staffers?
Well, USAID is an incredibly mission-driven agency where people come to work every day to save lives, to improve lives. It's honestly inspiring to work, including among those people who criticize me. They're incredibly talented people. They could be working in the private sector. Instead, they come to work every day to help people like the people who are suffering in Gaza. More than 40,000 civilians have been killed in Gaza, more than 13,000 children, more than 300 aid workers. I would honestly be disappointed if my staff were not in churn.
Listen, sometimes we sneak in weapons to rebel groups under the guise of humanitarian aid, but that comes with the territory, okay? That's also humanitarian weapons when you think about it.
And pressing for more. And I just feel lucky that I'm in the government, in the room, engaging the Israelis, working with the team that's pushing for a ceasefire, because fundamentally that's what's needed most of all, because clearly none of us can be satisfied with where things are now in Gaza.
Do you share any part of their concern that there's a hypocrisy to the U.S. policy there?
I share their focus on the human consequences of everything we do, and that's why we have live debates inside the administration. It's also why President Biden in the General Assembly today just talked about the importance of a ceasefire.
We heard the president also today speak about Sudan and what is now the largest humanitarian crisis on the planet. He recently said that now famine has taken hold in the Darfur region. I know that aid trucks have not been able to reach one of the largest camps for displaced people there, and access there has been blocked by some of the militia forces. What more can the U.S. do? I know you're already providing record levels of aid, but should we be considering airdrops, some other means of getting aid in?
All of the above, but it is really important to say that we cannot humanitarian aid our way out of the kind of widespread famine that is at risk of breaking out across Sudan. You're right, USAID is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in commodities, but many of those trucks are just sitting at checkpoints. And that's just a matter of political will. It's a matter of, do these self-interested generals who clearly care more about themselves than their country, are they willing to put their own interests above even letting trucks get through that could avert famine? And so there are plenty of countries who are providing weapons to those actors who could be exercising their leverage, and that is what the diplomacy is about this week.
We heard the president call for people to stop that supply of weapons into that conflict. Is the U.S. doing enough, in your opinion, to leverage those relationships to stop that flow of weapons in?
Well, every channel that we have to those major players in this conflict, we are using, including this week, in very high-level engagements, including some that I've had myself, certainly those the president, the most important.
And do you feel there's been progress in those talks this week?
We'll see. I mean, there's certainly verbal progress, and we have heard a lot of commitments to peace that are not then followed through with actual termination of weapons supply. But we also...
What happened to that dock we spent millions on in Israel? That was literally a way to, that was a mechanism in which we could claim that Israel was allowing humanitarian aid in so they could continue the bombing. That's literally what that was for. Okay? And yes, it sunk. It never also got any fucking humanitarian aid into Gaza. The goal was not to actually deliver humanitarian aid. The goal always was to simply say, look, we're trying to deliver humanitarian aid. See, Israel is letting us deliver humanitarian aid. It was a multi-million-dollar PR effort that failed. The $230 million U.S. Gaza aid pier, May 17 opens, May 25th, damage. June 7, reconnected. UN pauses distribution on June 9th after Israeli forces killed 274 Palestinians. June 14th, removed. June 19th, reconnected. June 28th, removed. June 9th, official announced to be briefly reinstalled but failed. And on July 17th, it officially closed. Bye-bye, dock. It was never actually intended to do the purpose. It was simply a PR move. It is kind of similar to when Israel says, we are going to prosecute 9 of the concentration camp guards at Sde Tayman. Why are they doing that? Because there is an ongoing ICC arrest warrant application in play. And if the ICC actually secures those arrest warrants, then they will investigate all of the war crimes that Israel refuses to investigate. In an effort to get away with doing war crimes, they have to be very careful and make it seem as though there is like a normal process of law and order inside of Israel. It's called complementarity, which is a shield that Western adjacent and Western forces use to make it seem as though they are abiding by international standards. But given the way that, given the incompetence and the corner cutting and the cost cutting measures that we implement even in our military, we can't even do the PR thing right. It's just a song and dance to continue the genocide. It's no different than saying Joe Biden and I are working tirelessly around the clock to find an end to this ceasefire thing, to make a ceasefire thing happen. Okay? It was simply a talking point. And I told you at the time that it was simply a talking point. God damn, dude. Holy shit.